You're listening to the 40 Fit Radio podcast dedicated to the 40 plus community. Join us as we discuss the truth about fitness and health using science, reason, and the experiences of our host and content experts. Welcome to the 40 Fit Nation.
Welcome back to the 40 Fit podcast. This is Coach Trent and Coach D sitting across the table from me. Yes, last week we talked a little bit about training through adversity, just a little pep talk to help you get through whatever roadblocks might be in your way in your training journey. Today we're going to talk a little bit about training through injury and pain.
Yes. So no matter what your mode or chosen method of fitness methodology is, you are probably going to experience a quote unquote, and I use air quotes on that because not all discomfort while during training is injury, but you're going to experience a perceived injury that you have to modify or alter, or maybe you think you might need to stop training. But here's our goal today. Our goal is to take the concepts of training through adversity and roll right in from those concepts into one of the adversities that you might experience. So if you haven't listened to last week's episode, please do so. But one of the adversities that you might experience might be a perceived injury. And I use that term perceived because sometimes what you're experiencing might not be an injury. You might not actually be hurt, but you might actually just have a little tweak here or there. Or to be honest with you, based on your personality and based on how well you handle the hard and how well you handle voluntary hardship and how well you have developed your stoic person inside of you might determine how well you adapt to normal training adaptations and stimuluses, which can be perceived as soreness and discomfort and maybe sometimes pain in areas of your training or a rep or two, or maybe even in a week or two. And so our goal today is to get you to where you can train through your adversity, and that adversity being injury.
That's right.
So that's our goal today, is to educate you and equip you with the skills that you need to be able to make a general assessment as to whether I should stop training, modify training, or just keep training the same. That's right. Really all you can do. One of those three things is when you're talking about your training is to stop training, don't train at all, seek help first from a medical provider. Number two, modify your training. And this doesn't matter whether you're a cyclist or a swimmer or a runner or you're in yoga or you're lifting barbells or you're doing CrossFit or whatever it is to modify that training. Or number three, not change your training at all and just push through it and move forward. And so our goal is to give you some skill set and some tools that you can use to do that. The number one thing that I want to emphasize today as a medical professional is this: you are not a machine, and no program, no assessment method, no diagnostic test is 100% foolproof. I mean, some have better specificity and sensitivity than others. And we can say with a large amount of accuracy that if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, flies like a duck, and looks like a duck, and smells like a duck, it's probably a duck. But sometimes we see lions and tigers where we think they're ducks too. So it's important to recognize that you're not a machine. Nothing is foolproof. But what we're trying to give you is some reasonable certainty that in your training, you can do one of those three things we talked about. And our number one goal to be to have you move forward. So
so if you do this thing called life long enough, you're probably going to get injured at some point.
Yeah.
And here's the interesting thing. Right. You get banged up from time to time. That's why we say life deloads us in more ways than one. That's one of the ways it does it. But, it's interesting when we look at the statistics, when we kind of take away our personal experience, we look at the broad statistics of sport and training, the numbers are actually pretty good in terms of getting injured, right? So people tend not to get injured very much in the gym. Right. People get injured more doing sport, but I'm willing to bet, and I'd be curious to get your clinical experience with this, that most people that get injured, right, they herniate a disc or they blow out a knee or whatever, it's not in sport, but it's just in everyday activities when that happens.
Yeah, I think it varies from clinic to clinic, but if I look at our clinics, our 6 clinics that are in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, if I take those clinics, I would say the number one cause of injury would be just everyday life. The second highest cause of injury would probably be work-related. And then the third highest cause of injury would probably be sport-related. And then the fourth highest cause of injury might be some specific exercise intervention that they're doing. It's not sport necessarily,
right?
But they're exercising.
They're training or
right.
exercising.
They're training or exercising. Yeah. They're doing, they were out on a cycle and they got in an accident, or they were swimming and they pulled their shoulder, or they were in the gym and doing something like that. But I'm going to be honest with you. I very rarely see barbell lifters per se, and the data is pretty clear. Barbell lifters in 100,000 hours of, or let's just call it strength training, of training, have a lower incidence of injury than runners, soccer players, swimmers, gymnasts. I mean, you can go down through the laundry list of sport and exercise. And I think it's something like 1.3 injuries for every 100,000 hours of training
per 1,000 hours of training. But there is if you look at PubMed, there's a recent meta-analysis of 9 studies about injuries across various sports, and for weightlifting, the injury incidence was 2.4 to 3 injuries per 1,000 hours of training. Or now that's weightlifting. We're talking about Olympic weightlifting, which is a high skill, high impact sport.
Speed-based, power-based, a lot more explosive.
For powerlifting, the studies indicated a range from 1 to 4 injuries per 1,000 hours. So the lower bound was lower for powerlifting. Yeah. Now
we could average that out to 2. 2 per 1,000 hours.
We could say 2 per 1,000 hours.
So you need to erase the previous 100,000. But 2 for every 1,000 hours of training.
And here's the key, right? So first of all, these are non-contact sports, right? So the incidences are much lower than, say, soccer or football or rugby or any sort of contact sport with a dynamic component where you're cutting and running and changing direction quickly. The other thing is this is competition, right? So we're talking about people who are actually competing lifters to lift as much as they can.
They're pushing the limits and boundaries of normal physiology.
That's right. They're pushing the boundaries. We're not talking about someone who's following a sensible, logical training program at a gym.
For fitness and recreation.
I have to imagine, I don't know if there's been any studies done on just recreational or just kind of just training in the gym, but I have to imagine the numbers are a lot lower.
Well, I do know that, my colleague, Dr. Newworth, Tina, she did a paper in her doctorate work on the incidence of osteoarthritis and squatting in non-lifters versus Olympic weightlifters and lifters. And the incidence of osteoarthritis or arthritis in non-lifters was actually lower than it was in the normal population. So we developed some preconceived biases and ideas around the fact that exercise hurts us, but probably more often than not, being sedentary hurts us more and is the producer or the predictor of injury more than being fit is. Being fit actually reduces your risk of injury, and actually strength, of all the fitness variables, of all the 10 general physical skills, is the best and can predict a 69% reduction in risk for injury and re-injury versus any of the other 10 general physical skills. Yeah. So just being stronger is going to reduce your risk for injury and allow you to train better. And if you do have an injury, come back faster.
So, and this is important, right? Because this is all well and good and academic and great, but I'm sure some of you are sitting there and you're like, man, that's awesome, but I got a thing, right? My shoulder hurts.
I got a thing.
I got a thing. It's
and I can't train with the thing.
But here's, I think, what the point of this is. The point of this data is and correct me if I'm wrong here, is that in your clinical opinion, certainly this is the way I look at it as a coach, is if I'm going to tell you not to train, okay, if I'm going to make that decision or that recommendation, then that means that I have to make the assessment that the risk of training is greater than the risks of not training.
Correct. Well,
and as you just laid out, the risks of not training are significant.
Right. And that we're going to cause more harm. That's the key there. Do no harm. That's the number one principle, precept. Do no harm. That my recommendation to train through the injury or to train through a problem or a tweak or whatever, put you at greater risk to cause more harm than it does good, or make your condition worse, or put you at risk. And so we can't do that. That's the no-no. That's the thing that we just will not. We can't go down that road. So we do bear some risk in that, and it's important to understand that you're not a machine.
Right.
That you're a human, organic being, and not all things are foolproof. I mean, not any one recommendation. 1 + 1 does not equal 2 in the human body. It's just not that simple. And so sometimes it's more complex than that, but we can say with some level of certainty, according to the literature and the research, and this is in the physical therapy world, we're seeing more and more of this coming out with organizations like Rethinking Physical Therapy and the Physiotherapy Network. These are evidence-based organizations that are starting to debunk some of the things that we used to think as therapists were kind of our general dogmatic go-tos. There was dogma. Now we're starting to rethink some of those things, because now we're seeing research is not bearing that out. And more importantly, probably than research, is just practical experience, just common sense tells me that's not true. There many of those things aren't true anymore.
Right.
So I think what we're trying to say here basically is this, is that if you have that thing going on, our number one goal would be to allow you to train through that injury. So let's talk a little bit about those concepts and how you can do that. Number one, if you've experienced a tweak or an injury, or it may have been a quick episode where all of a sudden you felt something in the bottom of the squat, or you were doing some type of CrossFit workout and you felt a pop, or you felt a pain somewhere, or you were on your cycle and you felt a pull in your calf, or any one of these different things. The number one thing is to not make that a bigger catastrophic event than it really is.
Yeah.
Don't, like you said earlier, don't catastrophize the event.
Right.
Because many times that's what happens. You have this problem that occurs, and then all of a sudden you've got this thing. You've got this thing.
I got a thing.
I got a thing.
I got the itis now.
We don't want to go down that road. Okay, we won't go there. But you got this thing that you can't get rid of now, or this problem, this perceived problem that you've got. And then we have a tendency to make that a larger catastrophic event than it needs to be. Let's respond to it and not react to it. Let's respond and not react to it. And so our response should be, number one, to evaluate the problem. If you have a coach, that's two minds, and two minds are always better than one usually. So there's a good opportunity to talk that out with your coach. If you're in the middle of the session, talk that out with your coach. Reach out to them via voicemail or via text, or if you have a social media tool that you use, whatever you're using, or if you're right there in person with them, which is best always, live, real time coaching, then let them know, hey, I felt this when I was doing this, and get feedback from them. Odds are they have more experience than you do if they're your coach.
Right.
So they might have a little bit more insight into that area.
And I'll say this, like we want to hear from you. You know, it kind of goes there.
We don't want you to shove that down.
That's right. Yeah. So it cuts both ways. Like there are some clients that overshare and that tell us about every little tweak, and most of that stuff is going to go right in one ear and out the other. And it's not because I'm not listening; it's because what I'm doing is I'm weighing your subjective experiences that you're telling me against what I'm seeing with my eyes as you're moving, right?
Yes.
And so sometimes there's those types of clients, but then there's the other thing too, where there's clients who will sometimes have some pretty gnarly tweaks that they're working through, and they won't tell you anything until it's just unbearable, and they're like, yeah, it's been hurting for
that's
like
the other
4
end
weeks.
of the spectrum. That's we don't want that either,
right? And they're like, yeah, this has been killing me for like 3 weeks, and it's
I
don't want to hear that, because
right.
I will make adjustments, but what I need, so we like that feedback. So what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, we want to be responsive to the injury.
However,
but we want to react to it. I mean, we want to respond to it, not react.
That's right. So let us know, but at the same time, recognize that we may not react in a way that you expect, right? So we may be pretty stoic about it, right? We may say, okay, all right, so thanks for letting me know. let's just keep going.
Yeah.
And we may not always, we may not give you the attention that you think you ought to have for that injury. But what we're doing is we're weighing your subjective experience that you related to us, which is valuable data. But we're also weighing it against the objective data that we see too. Is are the loads going up in training? Is the intensity going up? Is the movement quality good? Right. All those things. And so then we'll make an assessment based on all of those factors. That's why it's important to have a second pair of eyes. That's why we have coaches.
I mean, we always say this, it's multivariate,
Yeah, exactly.
It used to be all ball bearings, right? But now it's multivariate. It's just multivariate. There are many different variables in this equation to consider. And the simpleton view is not always the best view, but to be overly complicated for the sake of complexity is not good either. So the goal is to have a broad view and to evaluate these things. And so let's say you're sitting there and you're in the middle of the deadlift and you pulled some warm-up reps and you felt a tweak in your back, okay? So the first thing that I would have you do is, and when you tell me as a client, when a client comes to me, whether it's in the gym or in the clinic, and they tell me, I did this and I felt this, or I'm doing this and I'm feeling this, it's real time maybe, and I'm working with them right then I go through a series of questions in my mind. And those questions go very, very quickly. Tick, 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 tick. It's like a checklist. Boom, 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 boom. And I'm going down that checklist in my mind, and it's a learned response over years of treating people, years of training people, and having the academic rigor that I needed to learn all the basic foundation of knowledge, and then taking that foundation of knowledge and applying it in real life scenarios and seeing success and failures in many different cases, and then coming up with, in my mind, a didactic problem-solving approach to how to respond to that individual then. So I will say this, and this is one of my pet peeves. Please don't come to me and become a Google Doc. Please don't go online and research yourself exactly what you think your problem is, because unless you have a learned medical background, and I don't mean that, I'm not just talking about academic, that you have to be an academic or anything, but unless you've studied physiology, unless you've studied anatomy, unless you've studied body systems, unless you've studied, the organ systems, unless you've studied injury and type of tissue pathology and all these different things, and you know how to take your own history, and you know how to do objective and subjective measurements and do diagnostic measurements, then you're trying to, it's like you trying to go online and figure out how to fix one of these new vehicles out here that's got crazy electronics in it, and reading some manual online. It's going to be difficult for you. It's going to be extremely difficult for you.
You're trying to do addition, and you're trying to do calculus.
Yeah, and what it then does is it starts to, then you start to develop a certain amount of confirmation bias, and you start to develop, I've got this problem, and then it starts to affect your actions. And I'm not saying don't learn, and I'm not saying don't look for resources. I'm just saying try to not jump to a conclusion where you decide this is the problem, this is what got to be fixed, and then I'm going to go to my healthcare provider and tell them this is what's wrong, because 9 times out of 10 it's not. No, every now and then it is, but 9 times out of 10 it's not.
And it's interesting, you have some clients who are MDs or have in the past, right? And even those that have medical experience, how often are they, when they try to self-assess, how often are they correct?
I'm wrong every time I assess myself.
Right.
And I will tell you this, that I would consider myself an expert in this area, but I'm not foolproof. I've made mistakes. I'm going to make mistakes moving forward in the future. I hope that through experience and knowledge and know-how and a desire to continue to learn on a daily basis, that I get better and better at not making mistakes. That's the goal, and to do no harm with both people in the clinic and clients in the clinic, and also clients in our gyms. But that's the first thing. Don't catastrophize it. Number 2, don't try to be your own doctor, your own Google doctor. And evaluate and assess. Evaluate and assess is the key. And so I'm going to go through a list real quickly of red flags, of things that are very large red flags that should say to you, you need to seek medical help. Number 1, that would be severe pain. Severe pain. Now, when I mean severe pain, If you're a woman out there, you'll relate to this. It's like having a baby pain with no epidural. It's like severe pain, natural childbirth, severe pain. Please stop the pain from coming. It's the pain train. This is severe, high intensity. I've got to go to the hospital, writhing in pain. You should not have that during your training, after your training, or having anything to do with fitness. You should not have that. Severe pain, if we put it on a number scale, which is so hard to measure, but if we use 10 as, take me to the hospital. If I am out in the woods, fly me on a helicopter to the hospital. Severe pain.
Like you're probably having a seizure at that point.
Well, it's 10. It's so painful that you're out of your mind pain. That's 10. 0 would be no pain at all, normal existence. And I would say that in many people's lives, 0 to 3 is probably normal existence. 0 to a minimal to moderate level of discomfort and pain. 5, 4 and 5 would be something that's kind of midstream. It's moderate. It's something that you don't want to live with, but it's something that you recognize as a little bit more apparent, that it might actually begin to limit your function some.
I call that tweaky. I'm feeling tweaky.
Yeah, maybe a little bit more than tweaky. Tweaky might be like 2, 3, 4, somewhere in that range. Yeah. But 5 is getting to where you're like, if this continues, I might ask someone's opinion on this. 6 and 7 would be something that I would probably definitely seek help and ask opinion for. I wouldn't necessarily stop training, but I would seek help for that. But 8 and above, maybe even 7 and above, seek help. Seek help for that, because that's at a level to where you should not be experiencing that much pain. And you need to seek help for that. The second thing would be, besides severe pain, would be what we call unrelenting pain. I mean, it's something that's just not going away. It's getting worse and worse and worse, or it's staying at that high intensity level. The third thing would be a loss of visceral function, which would mean organ function. Like you're having a problem with your bowel or bladder. You're having a problem with you're having blood in your urine. You're having blood in your stool that you've never had before. And you notice it during training, or you notice it, when you go to use the restroom during a training session or something. You never had that. It doesn't necessarily that we're going to stop your training, but we're probably going to have you seek medical attention to take a look at that to see what's going on. But any loss of, and when we talk about your organ system, let's talk about your mind, your mental capacity. A loss of mental acuity, confusion, disorientation. That should not happen normally during your training. Now, when you come out of a real heavy set of 5, you're going to be mentally taxed and a little bit maybe disoriented. But that's going to quickly go away.
Yeah.
And it's going to happen more often than not after you hit your heavy load, or you have the effort, but it's not something that should have to happen often. But a loss of visceral or body function, and along with that body function would be muscular or nervous loss, meaning you're no longer able to move a limb. You're no longer able to control the movement of a limb, or a limb goes limp. Or you have spasticity in a limb, like you have severe contraction, more than just cramping, but a severe cramp could also cause that. But you have a loss of muscular movement or control of a joint, because that could mean, that you have a neurological problem, whether it be peripheral, in the periphery of your body with the nerves, or a central nervous system disorder. And then the other thing would be severe numbness, tingling, in areas that in any area of the body, really. I had a lifting client the other day that had been complaining of some anterior thigh numbness. And I thought it was most likely compression of his lateral femoral cutaneous nerve, of where the belt was, and the size of his hips and thighs are getting larger. Fascia's expanding. It's kind of common to get some numbness on the anterior lateral portion of the thigh. But then, during a squat set the other day, he complained of saddle numbness down around his anus and the rectum area, and it was intermittent. That's something that I'm going to have him go see a doctor for.
Yeah.
He should not be having that. Now, if he was riding a bike and he was a cyclist and he was having that on a cycle, I could generally say cause and effect.
Right.
He could be getting some compression of his perianeal nerves, and we need to get the pressure off of that area. We need to change his seating or move him back or forward or whatever on the seat.
Yeah.
Do some modifications to his bike fit, whatever. But when we're talking about someone in squat or a deadlift getting this symptom, most often it's in the squat. No, we got to seek help for that. That's not something I want to hear from my client.
Yeah.
That we need to seek help for that. And then the last thing would be an obvious malformity or deformity in a joint, a segment. Let's say you went to the bottom of a squat and you felt a snap in your ankle, and you looked down at your ankle and it ain't right. It's got a crook and a crank where it should be straight. That's not good.
Right.
That's not good. And so we want to get that seen. That would be something that would be emergent. And that would cause severe, unrelenting pain, and you would seek medical help immediately.
So I think, if we could kind of sum most of these signs up, right? The red flags, it's you're going to know when something's really up, right?
Yeah.
If you have to ask yourself, like, is this a big deal? It's probably not, but
you might want to seek advice of your coach.
Right, but you might want to seek advice. Yeah, absolutely. But so those are some good things. Now, I wanted to kind of drill down a little bit into the sensations of pain, right? Because you mentioned numbness and tingling. We
those
also
are neurological pains.
Neurological
Sometimes
pains.
vascular too.
Okay, so we also have we're familiar with like shooting or acute pain in a localized area, as well as kind of a dull ache that might be a little bit more general and kind of over a whole body segment as opposed to one localized area. Can you say anything about those different sensations of pain and what they might
categorizing pain?
Yeah, in terms of what's triaging it, right? What's kind of worth seeking attention versus training through?
Yeah, if you have a sharp pain that's generally in one area, a localized area, that could be a joint problem. That could be a tendon attachment problem. Maybe you pulled a tendon a little bit and you've got a little bit. And really, when we talk about pain, we have to talk about whether it's acute, subacute, chronic. So it could vary from timeline of when the incident occurred to what you're now feeling. So, but let's just say this is an acute incident or something that's kind of been going on for a week or so. Generally speaking, pain that's sharper in one location could indicate, it could be a joint problem. You could have a loose body in a joint. That would also go with locking or kind of seizing of the joint's movement. But it could be a sharp incident. That could also cause some general aching in the area. Arthritic pains are generally achy. It's less localized and more diffuse in an area where you just have soreness and achiness in the area where bones and muscles and tendons are involved. But most oftenly, that's the joint itself. Just got some arthritic changes in the joint. So aching would be more associated with arthritis. Arthritis generally gets better with movement and gets worse. It's worse early in the morning when you first get up and you get moving and the joints are stiff and tight and uncomfortable. Once you get some lubrication, motion's lotion, lubrication's everything. Once you get moving, then it hurts a little less. But then when you've been on it throughout the day or you've been using it throughout the day, it can get worse in the evenings. When you go to sit and rest, if you got some knee arthritis or hip arthritis, and you sit for an hour and you go to get up and you're stiff and sore and it feels like it's not in the muscle bellies around the area, but it's actually in the joint at the where the part moves. That's probably a little arthritic changes in your joint. Sharp lancinating, what we call lancinating pain, sharp pain that starts in one area and refers down or refers around. Goes from one area to another and has a tingling component to it, an electrical component to it. Causes more of a severe discomfort or even sometimes maybe lighter pains. Those can be nerve pains, generally speaking, peripheral nerves. If it starts at your spine, or if you notice that there's some spinal discomfort too, and then you have pain down your arm, that could be a cervical spinal nerve root. Same could be with the back and the lower legs, okay? But I know patients all the time, they have no neck pain, no neck dysfunction, but they have arm pain and they have arm weakness and they've got a neuropathy. They've got a compressed nerve root in their neck.
Okay.
But the problem is down the arm.
It's down the arm.
That's generally going to be numbness, tingling, weakness, lancinating pain, sometimes if it's more acute.
So if we're dealing with those types of pain, right? If they're not associated with any of the other red flags that we've highlighted,
Right.
then would you say we're probably okay to go ahead and train?
Well, I tell people all the time, the pains that I'm most concerned with, neurological pains or let's rephrase that, neurological symptoms,
Okay. Yeah.
severe numbness, severe tingling, paresthesias, feeling of vibration, a feeling of, also sometimes people say the foot feels big. It feels full in my shoe. It feels like my foot's 2 times the size of the other foot, and it's not visibly swollen.
Right.
Or lack of muscular function, weakness, dysfunction in that area. That's something that needs to be seen. That's something that needs to be seen, and training does need to be modified or halted until we figure out what the heck's going on there. If someone comes to me and they've got numbness and tingling in their arm, it's probably going to be in a particular distribution. And they say, yeah, and I noticed that my grip just feels weaker. I'm going to take a look at that. I'm going to test their reflexes. I'm going to do sensory testing. I'm going to do manual muscle testing on them. I'm going to look for a pattern of weakness that coincides with the mapping of their body in which nerve root could be involved. And if I see a trend there, they say they have a C5 compression or a C6 nerve root pathology, then I'm going to refer them to a neurosurgeon or a physician, say this needs to be taken a look at. Let's hold on doing upper body lifts or things that compress down in your neck and spine until we have a look at this.
Right.
Especially if the symptoms are more severe.
Yeah.
Now, I will tell you this. I've had some, I've had some low back surgeries. I have some numbness and tingling in my legs, some discomfort in my legs that are nerve referral pain or symptoms very frequently with training, without training, just period. It's just got a junky back. But I don't stop training because of it.
Right.
Because the symptoms are not getting more severe, and the symptoms are just something that I know I'm going to have to live with in some areas.
And I think that's a great segue into, okay, what do we do? We have a thing now. We got a thing. And we're trying to determine what we need to do. So let's say we're in the middle of a training session, whatever it is, and we feel a pop, feel a twinge, a tweak, whatever it is. What are some basic steps we can do to
well, the first thing I want to do real quick is mention this. We want to also talk about the 5 cardinal signs of inflammation.
Okay.
And the 5 cardinal signs of inflammation are dolor, which means pain, and we want to have pretty significant pain there. Color, which means heat. Okay, so there's heat in the area or an increase in temperature in the area. Rubor, which means redness. There's a redness in the area because it's swollen and hot and painful.
Visible, yeah.
Right? And then the swelling part of it is tumor. Okay, that's where we get our word tumor.
It's not a tumor.
It's swelling. These are all Latin names for these
right.
English names. And then functiolacia, which basically means a loss of function. So if you have pain, heat, redness, swelling, and a loss of function, that needs to be seen. Training needs to be modified. I'm not saying training needs to be stopped, but it needs to be addressed by a medical professional, and your coach needs to know about that. So not always, though, do we have those signs of inflammation. We just have other mechanical pain where it's not really swollen, it's not really red. Maybe the only thing we have is just pain. It just hurts when we're working with it. Well, that's something that can be trained through many times. And so the next step would be, after we have made sure that we're not catastrophizing it, make sure that we're not being a Google Doc, that we've assessed it, that we want to keep moving. Motion is lotion. And even in the rehabilitation process, very seldomly will I bring a patient in that I'm not going to do anything with. They're going to be moving. I've got a client right now, she needs a total knee. Her knee is trashed. She's going to have a total knee. She's in her late 40s. It just is what it is. She's got bone on bone. She's got bone spurs throughout the knee. The knee is swollen and painful, and we're still doing things with the other 3 extremities.
Right.
Because we can still train her. That level of fitness is going to help her mindset. It's going to help her sense of wellness. It's going to help her emotions. And it's going to help her physiology to heal faster in this other area, even if she does have a total knee replacement. So we don't have to stop our training because of her knee. We have to limit our training on that knee right now.
Right.
But we can do one-legged leg press. We can do step-ups. We can do upper body lifts. We can do presses. There's a lot of things we can do. We can do rack pulls. There's there's a lot of things that we can do with this knee, even though this knee is bad.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
the goal there is it's a change in mindset. The first thing is a change in mindset, that we can't automatically make the assumption that because we're hurting a little bit or we're having a tweak, that not training is the best response. That's a preconceived assumption that we need to break.
Right.
Because it's not accurate when it comes to science.
And as we pointed out at the beginning of the episode, right, there are consequences to not training. Not training is not a magically, I think the assumption most people have in the back of their minds when they think, oh, I got to stop, is that stopping will never hurt you. But it does hurt you, right? Like, we know that all you have to do is look at the list of chronic diseases.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, that not training does have consequences too.
A sedentary lifestyle leads to a lower predictor of health, a lower predictor of longevity and quality of life than being a pro athlete does.
That's
or
right.
training does.
Yeah, exactly.
Or having a fitness lifestyle. It's just, that's the data. That's the data.
So that's why we point all this stuff out, is that there's we've got a cost benefit analysis that we do for everything, right? And then,
absolutely.
And it weighs very heavily in favor of training.
Right. And I think that if you have an injury, let's say you have a perceived injury during your training or during your fitness program, the first thing I want you to do is, if you have a coach, seek your coach's help. We've talked about that, right? Seek help. If you have any of those red flags, seek medical help, and seek medical attention. And then you can modify your training appropriately. And we are always a resource. I am always willing to discuss things with you via email. Usually a personal phone call works better than that. I'm not going to give you, quote unquote, medical advice unless you're my patient and I have a prescription to treat you, but I can give you some general guidelines as a strength coach and as someone who is learned in this area to help kind of guide you through the process. And I might be guiding you to another local doctor of physical therapy or to a good physician in your area, or if I think it's appropriate, a good strength coach, a starting strength coach, or a good strength coach in your area. But the number one thing that you probably need to do up front is lessen the intensity of whatever training model you're doing.
Sure.
Let me give you a perfect example, and I think this will wrap all this up for people today when we're talking about training through an injury.
Okay.
Let's say you're pulling on a deadlift. You're pulling on a deadlift and you're in your warm-up sets, and you get to warm-up set 3 of the 5 warm-up sets, and you tweak your low back. And let's say that day you're working up to 315 for one set of 5 as a male, or maybe whatever you're doing. 315 for one set of 5 is fine, as an example. And you're at
225. Let's say.
Well, let's say you're at 275 right now.
Yeah.
275. Yeah. Okay. Somewhere in that area. At that point, you're thinking to yourself, well, I'm done for the day. I'm done. I can't get my working set in. Not necessarily. My recommendation to you as a coach would be, if I had watched your movement and I saw the tweak occur, I would say, okay, yeah, I saw you kind of give when you were pulling the bar through the middle of the range or whatever.
Right.
I saw your back give a little bit. All right, let's deload you a little bit. So let's just go ahead and go down to 135.
Yeah.
Let's take the plates off the end. Now, I want you to pull 2 reps for me at 135, and let's see how you feel. You get down in position. There's a little discomfort, but you pull 2 reps at 135, and you say, that hurts just a tiny bit, but not much.
Right.
I mean, that's not limiting my ability. And I look at your movement quality, and your movement quality is fine. You can do that yourself, too, if you video it.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So you can look that you're locking your back out, you're driving the bar off the floor with your legs, everything looks great. Step 2, go up a little bit more in weight. I might take you up to 155, 175. I might have you do another double. See how that feels. Step 3, that feels fine. Good. Step 3, I might take you up to 205, 225, and give me a single. Single looks good, but you say, that's starting to hurt a little bit more. Okay, great. Give me 2 sets of 3 at 225.
Right. Yeah. And that becomes your new,
that's your
working load for
that day.
Sure.
Right.
Yep.
And so, but we got work done.
Yes.
We established in your mind that you can do something when you're injured. And I think what you're going to find, and what I find 9 times out of 10 training clients in the gym is, I do 3 things for them. Number 1, I keep them in the game. which is important for not getting atrophy, loss of function, loss of training adaptation, going backwards, because if we're not going forwards, we're always going backwards. So that's the first value of it. Number two, I'm forcing the area to heal. So I'm actually promoting improved physiology in the area. I'm actually promoting for them to heal faster with less decline in capacity.
Right.
And lastly, and not least important, probably most important, I'm establishing in their mind the new model of thinking, the new dogma of thinking that when I get injured, I don't necessarily have to stop training.
That's right. Yeah.
That I'm going to train through the injury. And so what I see happen is a lot of times is they get their deadlift done. And I'll give you a perfect example. I had a client that during her squat, she felt an upper back pain. She told me, I think I'm going to be done for the day. I said, no, we're going to deload your squat. We deloaded her squat. She's a mid-50s female. We deloaded her squat. She was able to get her squats done with significantly less pain. Then she said, well, I don't think I'm going to press today. I said, no, we're going to press. So we pressed her bar warm-up sets, and she said, that hurts a little bit right there. I said, well, how bad is the pain? And I gave her the 0 to 10 scale. She told me, I said, all right, we're going to stay there with the bar, and we're going to do 5 sets of 3 with the bar, 45 pounds.
Yeah.
So that's what we did. So we got her press done. And then I said, well, how are you feeling now? By the end of the press, she's like, well, I don't really hurt as much. And I said, well, cool. Let's go ahead and do your deadlift because you got a deadlift today. And she walked out of the deadlift, and she had minimal to no pain, and we did her working weight that day. The next day, she said she was minimally sore, but the most important thing that we did for her were those 3 things. Number one, we didn't keep her from going forward. So we actually improved her ability to adapt and to not decline. Number 2, we're actually getting her to heal faster. Okay. And then number 3, we built her mind. So we made her stronger in the way that she thinks about training and injury. That is a perfect way to respond to injury. Now, in the weeks to come, I changed her programming some to drive intensity on the top side with much lower reps and then add in some higher reps in lower loads, back offsets on the back end to just flush the blood.
Keep the volume up.
Keep the volume up, flush the muscle with blood, but not have as much intensity volume as I had prior. And then we worked our way back up.
Yeah, that's
a great example of a muscular pain, but that could be equated to joint pain. That could be equated to a lot of different types of pain.
Right.
Generally speaking, when we're in training and we're doing strength training, the elements that most likely are going to get injured in order of frequency are going to be, number 1, muscular, number 2, tendinous, and number 3, joint pains or articular cartilage and inert structures like that.
Right.
And ligaments would probably follow in that area too. You really have to tweak an area to tear a ligament or to damage a ligament because it's a passive stabilizer. It's not an active contractile tissue. But muscles and tendons are what we really are looking at here treating, and those are the things that generally have problems. If we have those other problems that we mentioned earlier, like numbness, tingling, loss of body function, loss of muscular function, those lead to more serious conditions.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I love that example. I think, that's as coaches, that's something that we, so you in the moment decatastrophize the event, said, okay, all right, so that's let's quantify that experience that you just had instead of mirroring her emotions, right?
It was very emotional.
Yeah,
for her.
She's freaked out. She's like, oh my gosh, what happened, right? So you said, okay, well let's make this a little academic. Let's kind of externalize this thing and look at it from a distance. Let's rate it on a pain scale, right? And then we modified the training, drop the loads, and then going forward as a coach, you adjusted the programming for it. And I think that's a lot of times what you should expect out of a good coach, right? Is that they remain calm, that they help you modify the immediate workout, and then going forward, they just reevaluate the programming variables and see like, yeah, maybe the programming is just starting to overreach a little bit for that lifter or that athlete, and we'll pull back just a little bit. I had a similar event with one of our older gentlemen in the men's class in the morning. He tweaked his hamstring at the bottom of a squat. So we just finished out at a load that he could do. And I started introducing a a light day in the middle of his linear progression, right?
Adaptation.
Yeah, so we just slowed it down just a little bit, and that was one of those things where similarly, the day that he tweaked it, it hurt pretty good. Yep. The next workout, it hurt pretty good, but the next workout never got worse, right? And the next workout got a little bit less,
and you kept him in the game.
That's right, I kept him in the game. 2 weeks later, bam, he's back to normal.
Yeah, and his doctor would have told him to take 4 weeks off.
That's right.
So that's a perfect example. That's the difference.
And so and he was squatting about 160 at the time. Let's say what would have happened.
And that's a guy in his 60s, I think.
That's right.
He's 60,
he's about 60 years old.
Strong.
Right. And so let's look at what would have happened had he gone to the doctor and the doctor says, take 4 weeks off. He takes 4 weeks off. What is he going to be squatting when he comes back? If he comes back.
Yeah.
First of all, he hasn't trained.
I think that's the you just said the
more
tail
likely
wagging
outcome.
The dog right there.
Right.
If he comes back. Because now he has a preconceived bias, confirmation bias, that training injures you. We have to break that cycle of thought and help our trainees and help our clients, including ourselves, to understand that not being in the gym or not being active in life or not being involved in our chosen recreational activity, hiking, whatever it is it ultimately leads to decline.
Right. Exactly.
That's
he would have.
problem.
Let's just take the unlikely scenario that he takes a month off and then actually comes back to the gym. Most people won't. But if he does, what is he squatting now?
Yeah, exactly.
90 pounds.
Yeah.
He just lost a significant amount, and it gets that deload or that reduction in strength gets worse as we age. Right.
Well,
it's more acute, and so the point being that there are times in our life when we're going to have, as we talked about last episode, there's going to be roadblocks that we can't avoid, right? That's just life, right?
Yep.
So when we prepare our mindsets in the way that we've described in this episode, then when we're hit by the roadblocks that we can't avoid, that do stop us from training, right? We have something in reserve. We've got something to build back from, as opposed to letting the little roadblocks that we can deal with pull us back.
Well, we know that we all know that our investment account at some point is going to suffer a loss.
Right.
It's just the way life is.
Market goes up, market goes down.
That's right. That's right. What we want to try to do is to mitigate or to lessen the severity of that loss so that we can build back up to a higher level again. That's the goal. We're not saying that you're not going to suffer a loss, that you're not going to have roadblocks along the way. The key is, are you going to continue to invest? Are you going to continue to move forward, or are you going to allow that to thwart your efforts and you're just going to say, I think I'll live a sedentary lifestyle? And that's just not an option for people of the 40 Fit Nation.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, if we want to carry that metaphor just a little further, what do all the great investors say about bear markets, markets that are down?
Yep.
It's the best time to buy.
Yeah,
it's the best time to invest. That's right. That's right. So that's what they do, right?
Exactly.
The great investors are stoic about the market. They don't really care when the market's super high. They don't really care when it's super low. They keep executing their strategy and they watch the long-term results. And if the long-term results are good, they keep going.
Yep, they look at a trend line. And I think that's what you got to do too, is you got to look at a trend line and say, I started this 5 years ago, let's say on my fitness journey, and I started getting back in shape, and look where my trend line is. If the trend line is going up, that's always a good thing.
That's right.
And you might see some bobbles along the way, but that's having that long-term perspective, and that's what being in the game is all about, and that's why we think you should train through your injuries whenever possible. But man, guys, we appreciate you guys joining us here on 40 Fit Radio and joining the 40 Fit Nation. If you want to find out more information about our podcast, you can go to 40fit.com and click on the 40 Fit Radio tab. You can also download the podcast itself on Stitcher and iTunes and some of the other podcast softwares. You can find us on Instagram at 40 Fit Radio. You can find Trent's personal Instagram at Marmalade Cream, mine at DL Deaton. And you can go to Facebook and find us on the 40 Fit Masters community group. Thanks for joining us today and hearing about training through your injuries, and have a great day.